Okay, so Laurie, why don't you just start out by introducing yourself?
Okay, so Constable Laurie McCann. I've been with the Toronto Police Service now 24 and a bit years. Work at 52 Division as the divisional planner, and still loving my job.
Awesome. Almost 25 years in, that's a pretty good accomplishment, still loving your
Mhm.
job. So tell me first, you say you're a divisional planner. What does that mean?
So we deal with actually a lot of things within the division, but some of our main things that we do is protests, dealing with do we do an operational plan, bring in extra resources outside of 52 Division. We deal with events as well, so that could be parades, that could just be something.
Right.
We have Young Dundas Square and Nathan
Yep.
Phillips Square, plus the U.S. Consulate. So we have a lot of big and Queens Park. So we have a lot of big
You have
venues.
Young Dundas Square, because wouldn't that be 51 Division on the east side of Young?
So yeah, one would think, but it actually cuts out. So 51 is on the east side, except for Young Dundas. It cuts out.
Really?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
because
So
52 Division has the rock star divisional planners. You guys, because you have so much stuff that goes on in your division with the U.S. Consulate and just University Avenue in general, Queens Park, the entertainment, part of the entertainment district. I imagine that's a very busy job. And I know you've done a lot of stuff with social media too, which we'll get into, but you are a very, very busy woman. Laurie, why don't you just start out by bringing me back to the beginning? Tell me about little Laurie McCann. Well, actually, I don't know if that's your maiden name or not. Little Laurie growing up. Where did you grow up?
So I actually grew up in Brampton.
Okay.
And McCann's my married name. So yeah, I was there for 30 years of my life. I was in Brampton. So I used to work at a hospital for 8 years.
Oh, what were you doing there?
So I did what they call as a ward clerk, so like a medical secretary on the surgical floor. But I also worked on pediatrics and the psychiatric ward as well. I'd help out when they needed people. And then I did security full time for 3 years there before I got hired.
Okay, so when you went to security, was that like, were you thinking that's because you wanted to become a police officer? So you were trying to get some sort of policing related experience, or did the path just sort of naturally go that way?
No, that was part of it. I also worked for, it was called Universal ATM Services. So kind of like Brinks. It was one of those fixing bank machines. So we carried guns at that job as well. So I had the two to give me that experience. And my mom was a nurse and my sister. So the hospital is one of those jobs, like the government, you got to know somebody to get in.
Yes.
Yes, it was one of those. So if you knew somebody, you were in. And it was at my age at the time, that was a great paying job. It was a good paying job. So
yeah, no kidding. So your mom and sister are nurses. You become a police officer, both helping professions. What brought you down the policing route, whereas your mom and sister went down the nursing route?
I knew I didn't want to be a nurse. It wasn't something that a paramedic maybe, but a nurse, no. I know that sounds really weird because they're both, almost the same kind of
paramedics
career,
more out in the field,
yeah.
you're more having more interactions with people in their homes and whatnot.
Yeah. So then I don't know, policing was always something that was always in the back of my mind. Even in high school, I did my co-op with Peel Police at the time. And so my dad struggled with addiction, alcohol addiction. And my mom always said, you should be a social worker. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that, because I was always the helping one, right? I have a brother and sister, and I was the one that would leave him food and make sure that he was, eating and doing everything that he needed to do. So I guess it's been in my nature all my life. I'm the middle child. So, we get blamed for everything. There's a lot of abuse as a middle child. I'm just saying.
I'm a middle child as well.
So you understand, you totally understand my pain.
But each of my 3 siblings would argue that they had it worse than I did. So I shouldn't get too deep into it. Okay. So Laurie, like you just said, you mentioned your dad, he struggled with addictions and the whole mental health part. You also worked on the psychiatric ward for a period of time. Mental health, and we're going to get into this a little bit more later, mental health has been a big part of your career in recent years. Was that sort of a reason that you got into policing, do you think? Or did it just sort of happen that your past experiences have helped your current role? Not role, but your current life.
Yeah, like I think it was a bit organic. I forgot to throw in there, I did work at Canada's Wonderland for a year, security.
Oh, did you?
Oh, I
security?
Did, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I did do that for a year as well. So I think it kind of organically happened. It was something that I'd always kind of wanted to do. I did originally just think of hotel restaurant management, and I did that for like a semester, and I was like, no, this is not for me. And off I went, and I took the second semester off, and then I did the security. It's called lawn security. Yeah, it's called something different now, but at Sheridan College. So I think it was something, I don't know why, but it was something that was always there. I have a cousin that's a cop. That's the only other person in my family that's a cop. And he was way out in Kenora. If anyone knows, it's the tip of Ontario.
Exactly.
In the middle of nowhere. So
I've driven through there from Ontario to Saskatchewan. I've driven through there a few times. Lovely Kenora.
Yeah, see? Yeah,
he is very far. It is the place that reminds you of how massive Ontario is, because I think it took us like 20 hours to get there, or 18 hours to get there from Ajax, where we were living at the time.
Yeah, so it can be upwards. I guess depends how fast you drive. 24 hours. It's like going to Florida, right? And you're still in Ontario, so that's how huge it is. So other than Greg, I didn't really have anyone else that was in the policing field. I had friends. So I think it was something that was just something I wanted to do. And then I had a friend of mine die in the line of duty with Toronto, and then I went, ooh, I don't know if I want to do this. So I kind of
before you became a police officer.
Yep. So this was in 1994. So that was Todd Bayless. And then, so I kind of took a little, I don't know. And then I got hired 4 years later. I decided to apply in 98 and got hired. Yeah. So
what was going through your mind in those 4 years? Like, you were thinking of becoming a police officer, Todd is killed in the line of duty, and then you have 4 years between then and when you finally decide that's what you want to do. What's going through your mind during those 4 years? How did you come to that final decision?
I think it was one of those, I don't know, when he gets killed and gets shot and killed, it's like, well, I don't know if I really want to do this job. It's not that it was a lot to take in, I think, at the time. And when it hits that close to home of somebody, you're just kind of like, is this a career that I want to put my family through it? I mean, I was single at the time, but my parents and whatnot, put them through this. And I just thought, yep, it took me almost 4 years, but I was like, yes, this is something I wanted to do. And I was closer to Todd's brother, Corey, but I was always at their house. And his dad was one of my references. So he basically said, if you don't hire her, you should pound salt. And I was like, I go, you didn't, Ted, you didn't say that. He goes, oh, I did.
That's a pretty good reference. Well, that's really interesting, because I mean, any police officer who's working understands the dangers of the job. And policing, I mean, we're talking now in the new year in 2023, but as you know, the end of 2022, the last few months were just horrific for policing in Canada, and really brought into the spotlight the dangers of the job. But it's interesting that you're somebody who actually entered the job with that like top of mind, what the risks were. Do you think that had any impact on you in terms of how you did your job starting out, or did you just seem like any other rookie police officer back in 98?
Yeah, I don't think consciously it had an impact. Maybe subconsciously it did. If we had anything to do with, we had to bring up an officer that had killed in line of duty, I would use Todd. And then when social media, because obviously in 98 we didn't have social media, but as soon as that came into play, I would make sure that I posted every year for his anniversary. And I try and do as many officers as I can still to this day, as you know. So yeah, I don't think consciously that it changed anything for me. Just it was always there in the back of my mind.
So tell me, Laurie, how was the job when you started it? Was there anything that surprised you? Was there anything that scared you? Anything that delighted you about this job?
I think you never know, like, you come into work, you're putting your uniform on, you're going to be working with somebody, but what's going to happen after that, you have no idea. It's one of those, which is I think the best part about the job is you just never know what's going to come your way, right? But what I guess I didn't realize was how much you're actually sitting on this job.
Oh, really? Paperwork? Are you talking about paperwork?
Well, and sitting in the cruiser sometimes, right? You don't realize how much you're sitting. So, like, I vowed that, and listen, I wasn't a runner when I got on. I ran to get on the job, and I was like, I'm not running anything more than a mile and a half because I hated running, believe it or not. So I could probably count the amount of times in well, maybe not now, but in 24 years that I bought my lunch. Like, I would bring my food every day. I tried, like, coolers, like my lunch coolers grew as the years went on with the kind of food I had in there. So no, I was adamant about that because you're sitting so much, and fitness, is a huge part of this job. It has to be.
Yeah.
Because one minute now listen, putting on a pair of runners and wearing your running gear and going for a run is one thing. Wearing those shoes that are really not good for running, all this equipment on, you're sitting, your muscles are cold, and now you're chasing somebody. It's a whole other ball game.
Are the shoes still not good for running? Like, I feel like you guys should be wearing like some Asics or something like that.
Yeah. They have improved. They have
Okay.
definitely improved. So yeah, like fitness is a big part of it, and eating healthy is a big part of it, right? So
and Laurie, like, imagine how many hundreds or thousands of dollars you saved over the years packing your lunch. I was the same as a reporter, as a crime reporter in Toronto. I spent like most of my time in my car driving around, and I would pack, like you said, like the cooler gets bigger and bigger.
yeah.
You want something healthy to be able to grab. I would allow myself like one little or two little treats a day, but it's so much better than I'm too busy. I need to like go through the McDonald's drive-through. So good for you. And it saves money.
Yeah, like the only place I would go to, and the guy actually knew me, it was pretty funny. It's not even there anymore, but it was one of the few overnight places, right? Way back when we didn't have these places open all the time. And it was, they had these monstrous pumpernickel bagels, and I would get it double toasted with butter and jam. So good. That was my night shift treat. And I didn't do it every night, but the guy knew me. I'd walk in, hey, how are you? And he'd just start he knew what I wanted.
What division were you in then?
14.
Oh, in 14 division. Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like there's still some overnight places in 14 division, but anyway, I digress. Okay. So you had told me in a previous conversation, because like so much of what we discussed was about mental health. You told me about like the very first, was it your first shift or your first call? You had like a pretty traumatic event that you responded to. Are you comfortable talking about that? Just because I'm interested to talk about it through the lens of, how you reacted to it back then. And I don't know if things would be different today but I'll just let you take it away.
Yeah. Oh, they'd be different today for sure. So with my 3 seconds on the job, we get a call for a house fire. So I'm like, probably just pot on the stove, no big deal. And these are the row houses, right? So, what downtown Toronto, typical row houses. And we get there and the flames are just shooting up over like the covered part, right? And I was like, oh boy. And this was the year, if you remember, when Mel Lastman called in the army, because we had that wicked snowstorm. So,
so it was January. We're talking like exactly like 24 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or 20. Yeah. My math isn't very good.
1998, January 99. So 23 years ago. Oh my gosh. I'm probably getting my math wrong. Anyway, continue.
That's why we have calculators.
This time of year, many years ago.
Yes. Lots of snow, and I see a guy standing on the sidewalk, and I'm like, is there any, like, do you live here? He's like, yeah. I'm like, anyone else in the house? He's like, yeah, my girlfriend and dad. So I was like, oh God, well, I'm not a fireman, but your instinct is you want to go in and get these people. So I just let the fire department know, and then they went in and they brought her out, and she was lifeless. And my coach officer was kind enough to say she'll do CPR. And so I literally get in the back of the ambulance, and I'm like, hey, it's my first day. If you just want to mark, and I'll start pumping. Literally, that's what I said. Now, don't ask me what I did yesterday, but I can tell you what happened almost 24 years ago. Why? Because it's a traumatic event. We don't forget those things.
Yeah.
So anyways, we got her heart started again. She went to the hospital. Unfortunately, she was brain dead from the lack of oxygen, and she did eventually pass away. The dad survived. So, but it was one of those, listen, it wasn't a good one. Like the dad was, you hate to say this, but not a nice man. He saw her in the bed and didn't help her. He just covered his mouth and left her.
Oh my God.
We find out later. Yeah. So, you just, those are calls. Now that just happened. And then away I went. The media started calling. So our unit commander at the time, that's the one hallway you try to avoid. You don't want to go down because that
principal's office.
Yeah, you didn't want to do it. And then when he knew my name, I was like, "Ooh, this is probably not a good thing. It's my first day on the job, and my boss knows my name." And it was because the media was calling and they wanted interviews and stuff. So did
you do an interview, or he was doing interviews? No. Okay, good.
I didn't end up doing any for that event. It was in the paper with my name, no pictures, but that was it. I still have the article. I kept it.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay, so Laurie, like that, first of all, was that your first time doing CPR?
Yes, on a human being. Yes.
Wow. Yeah. I can't even imagine. So then you do that call and then it's just sort of like off to the next one. Like, how was that sort of incident dealt with back in 99 versus now? What do you think the difference would have been?
Yeah, that was it. We had overtime, so we had to do the reports and do all that stuff. And that was the end of it, right? It was a house fire. And then, so if you fast forward now, that call happens today, we would probably do what we call it is a CERT debrief. So the critical incident response team would be engaged, which I'm a member of, and then we would go and debrief anyone that was involved in that call.
Hmm. So, okay, CERT. So you're a member of the critical incident response team. What does that mean? Like for 52 division or for the service? How do those work?
So for the service, so there's I think about 80 or 85 of us, and we're also peer support members. But listen, I totally get it. There's a lot of officers. You don't want to talk to your peers because it's awkward if you run into them. So
and they might have been part of the same call, right?
Yeah. So you're obviously going to give them other options if they don't want to talk to somebody inside, but there is many members that are, CERT trained and peer support trained. And you work all over the city. I just did a CERT debrief in 42 division, and listen, east of Yonge, I'm lost. Like I'm a West Ender ripping through.
You've never worked in 4 district?
No. So I know it sounds funny, but I haven't.
You went up to Scarborough, northern Scarborough, I guess.
The only time I pass through there is when I go to Ottawa, because I have family in Ottawa. That's the only time I pass through Scarborough.
Yes.
So I've gone like to many divisions in the city because of CERT and doing debriefs and whatnot, depending. And there's many different types of calls that we deal with officers. And I think it's a great thing. Whether they sit there and listen and don't say anything, they're always taking in what you're saying. And I always follow up with an email with all the resources that I talked about, because it is a lot to take in and to remember all of it. And then I will follow up with an email so it's a fantastic program.
Is that like mandatory? If you're involved in a critical or traumatic incident, you have to meet with a CERT officer?
If they're called in, they have the officers there. You don't have to say anything. You're not you don't have to talk if you don't want to, but you just have to be there.
That's so interesting. And this is something I'm asking you so many questions. We hadn't talked about that before. So I'm just so curious as to how these things work. So what would the difference be between your CERT role and a peer support officer? Is that what you called it?
Yeah. So CERT is basically if you're debriefing, it'll be more than one officer. It'll be anybody that's involved in that call, including our dispatchers, because I think sometimes because you don't see them, not that they're forgotten, but they are, to me, truly the first responder. They're the ones that pick up the phone. They're the ones talking to these people in distress and that are in crisis. And then, then it goes to the dispatcher. So they definitely need to be involved as well. But a peer support would be one-on-one. So whether they contacted you, called you, want to meet for coffee, it's just one-on-one peer support. And everything is confidential, like everything we talk about, even on the CERT debriefs, as well as peer support, confidential.
So that didn't exist back in 99 when you had your first incident. It's so interesting because, like, I know when it comes to things like PTSD, that peer support, like studies have shown, right, the value of peer support, of being able to talk to your peers. Actually, I read a book a little while ago about a couple, I think they were former York Regional police officers, or maybe one was a police officer, one was a firefighter. You probably know who I'm talking about, Brad McKay and something. They wrote a book about Yes, about I think it was like the value of peer support and PTSD. So that's really fascinating. So maybe let's just sort of leapfrog then, because we're talking about mental health. This has become like a huge part of your life, of your role as a police officer, as a volunteer, as an advocate for mental health. Tell me how you got into this. Like, why CERT? Why peer support? And then we can talk about some of the things you've done with that passion.
Yeah, so it kind of happened organically. So I had one of my oldest daughter struggles with mental health to this day, still struggles. And that started at a very young age, of course, not knowing at the time what it was. So we've, it's been a lot, let's just say, over the years. So that kind of organically got me into, and I had a good friend of mine that struggled deeply with their mental health, and I've lost 5 friends to suicide. So I think it was a combination of all of that. So of it affecting us at home, and then having lost my friends, and then having one that's attempted several times, self-harm, like just many things, right? And so when I was I worked at the college for 5 years at our Toronto Police College, and I was teaching social media. And then I took on our Road to Mental Readiness course, which was a course for all members of the service, both sworn and civilian. And I ran that course and had 25 instructors, and I won't bore you with the details, but it just kind of organically happened. So I would talk about my experiences, plus losing my mom to cancer and then having a dad, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Even if you're not drinking, you're always an alcoholic, right? So dealing with that, dealing with my mom's death, dealing with my daughter, it's kind of a lot at times, right? When you're dealing with all of these things. So with my life experiences, I just became very passionate about it, because these are not, my daughter has mental health issues. My mom had cancer, my dad drank. It's not me that has any of those issues, but it affects me, right? And so I have to take care of my own mental health. And how do I handle that to be able to take on all of these things? Because if I'm not healthy, I can't help my daughter, right? And if I'm not healthy, I can't help my dad. So I think it was organic that kind of happened. And I'm passionate about it, 100% passionate about it, because I think we all suffer from burnout at some point in our life. You might not realize it. And if it goes untreated, it can turn into something deeper and bigger, right? And it's hard because it's not something physical where I go, hey, Tamara, you broke your arm. Ooh, that must have hurt. And I guess in about 6 to 8 weeks, you'll feel better, right? But when we talk about mental health, it's not, you can't see it. So it's really, truly hard, even for that person that's struggling to understand what's going on at that time. And, we see things on this job that you can't unsee. Yeah. Like we see things that are horrible things. We see people at their worst. And then throw in officers that used to be in the military. So we have veterans who have seen things we can't even fathom and done things that we can't even understand. So they bring that trauma with them. And now they're also, dealing with the trauma of being on the job and the stuff they see here. So it's really a lot. And I think, I don't want to, because I know you're going to talk to them, but with Jeremy and Aaron and the amazing work they're doing is just fantastic. But I just think I'm just so passionate about it because of what I've dealt with in my life. I can't speak for everybody else, but what's gone on in my life, that I think it's super important that the more we talk about it, the more normal it will be. So that makes sense.
So absolutely. So Laurie, I'm all about breaking down that stigma. It's still there a little bit, but we've come a long way. I want to say even it's just in the last 5 years or so. So Laurie, what have you learned about how you can take care of yourself? Like you said, your father, your daughter, your mother's illnesses, you didn't have those illnesses, but they were impacting you. So what have you learned through this journey about how you can take care of yourself and how you can teach other people to take care of themselves?
So for me, and everyone's different, right? For me, running is what works for me. That's how I I do my best thinking when I'm running, more so outside than on the treadmill, because on the treadmill, I'm usually watching like Netflix or Prime or something. And you're not really thinking, you're just kind of aimlessly watching TV. So for me, running is key. And some may say I'm addicted to it. Some may say it's unhealthy, but for me, it's healthy. I run usually 6 days a week. Wow.
Would people really say that's unhealthy? I mean, you're not running for 5 hours a day, are you?
I know. No, I don't have time for that. No, but some people do. If they don't understand why I run 6 days a week, and I have had people say that's crazy. Like, why do you run so much? Right? Well, it's what works for me, right? And I'm not running 20K every day. Like I'm doing anywhere from 5 to 10, right? Like it's a reasonable amount. So for everyone, you need that downtime. You need that time to self-reflect. You need that time to your me time, whatever that is. And it doesn't have to be exercise, whether it's reading, whether it's, crocheting, whether it's knitting, like whatever it is that works for you, doing puzzles, whatever, but it's your time. It's like having my coffee in the morning, my first cup. Nobody bug me. Nobody. Because it's like, I'm not enjoying this if you're talking to me. And I'm not enjoying this if I have to get up.
Yes.
So just give me one cup. That's all I ask.
Yes.
Second, whatever. Yeah. So
it's so important. Like everything you've described there, like whether it's the running or the knitting or crocheting, I used to crochet, puzzling, working out. It's like, it just gives you a chance to take all that chaos and just like center your mind, like settle your mind. And that is like be in the moment. It's so important. It is so important. I'm trying so hard to practice mindfulness. I'm working on it, but everything you just said resonates so much with me. And I am the same as you. Whereas I mean, I haven't lately because I've been so busy, but I used to work out 6 days a week, and people will be like, why are you going 6 days a week? You don't need, I'm like, it's not for my physical health. It is for my mental health. Like if I
Yeah.
don't, I would feel my anxiety start to spike. And it's like, what's going on? Oh, I didn't go to the gym the last 2 days because I was working late or whatever. But I
Yeah.
could sense those in myself, and nobody could see it physically, but they might notice I'm a little bit more agitated.
Yep, that's 100% correct. That's exactly it. And it's, and some people understand it. They're like, hey, I totally get it. I totally get why you work out. And others would say, why do you do that? Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's what works for me. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying it's perfect by any means. You still have your moments, but I think it really does keep you centered. So if I'm on a treadmill and my phone's ringing, and unless it's urgent, don't bug me.
Yeah.
Because again, you're not really in that moment, right? If you're
Yeah.
answering your phone or answering emails or whatever you're doing on social media, like just take that time for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm running outside, my phone's in my water pack, but I don't I'm not on it other than my music playing.
Mm-hmm. So,
Yeah.
okay. So Laurie, so speaking of running, I mean, you went from sort of a casual runner to doing longer distances. And speaking of traumatic incidents, tell me about how you got into that longer distance running. Like the event I'm thinking of, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was the one that kind of got you into running longer. Is that right?
Well, and running like the run to Ottawa.
Yeah.
So for fallen officers. So I
Yeah.
was, I was running at the time. I've done like 10 halves and a whole bunch of 10s and 5s. And
Okay. So you were already pretty serious about it, but okay.
At that point, yeah, I think I was, but I don't compete anymore. I just run for me. Because I always get injured when I do races, because
Oh,
then you got to
no.
beat you a type A personality. I'm like, I can't let
Yes.
you beat me. That's just not going to happen. So I was doing a paid duty for the Toronto Marathon, which, trust me, that kills me watching people run when I'm not running. I'm just like, I should be running. I should be running.
Yes.
Why am I doing paid duty? And I was at the intersection of Fort York and Lakeshore. So if you can picture that,
Yeah.
and you've got Coronation Park on the other side. And
Mhm.
so I hear that. So so you can visualize this. I'm in the left turn lane. The middle lane is for traffic. We let them through when we can, when there's a gap in the runners. The right lane's for runners. So the runners come down to Lakeshore. Full marathon goes left. Half marathon goes right. 500 meters to the finish line. They're done.
Mm.
There's a yellow school bus there. It was probably one of their buses that was given, the rides to the start line. And this woman, blood curdling scream, and I can't see her, but I can hear her. So I say to my partner, I'm like, I'll be right back. I'm just going to kind of go see what's going on over there. So I go around the bus, and this guy is face down, and I flip him over, and he's gray. And I'm like, oh, he's not breathing. This is not good. And this guy comes out of nowhere, and he's like, I'm a doctor. And I'm like, you
Take
are
it
in the
away.
right place at the right time. So he starts doing AR, which, I don't think I would have done that on a stranger. You never know, right?
Like mouth to mouth.
Yeah, he was doing mouth to mouth. And another guy, as I was about to start compression, shows up, and I can't remember his exact words, like, I'm a paramedic, going to be a firefighter, or I don't know, volunteer paramedic. I can't remember what he said, but I'm like,
I know what I'm
okay,
doing.
yeah. So I'm like, start compression so I can get an ambulance coming. So I get on the air and now the ambulances are on bicycles, right? Because they can't get vehicles in there
Mm.
at that point. So I call for that, and then I take over compressions for, his name was Tyler. And then as I'm doing compressions, this guy, remember that show Doogie Howser?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this guy comes out of nowhere, and he's like, I'm a doctor. And I'm literally like looking at him like this going, you look 12. Okay. So he's kind of guiding me. He's like, okay, slow down your compressions. He kind of, goes to his femoral artery to check, the pulses and stuff. And then the paramedics show up and literally throws the pads for the AED at me. Put these on. I'm like, okay. And anyways, they shock him. He doesn't wake up, but his heart starts. And we've been doing CPR for probably a good 7 minutes.
Wow.
So yeah, so the one doctor, as I call affectionately called Doogie Howser, he disappears as fast as he got there. And then the other one, Andrew, I wanted to get his information because I wanted to put them in for an award and for helping. And I said to the cop who goes with the runner, and I said, can you just let me know how he does and how he's doing and stuff? So he calls me and he goes, he's a cop. And I go, no, he's not. I go, you're lying to me. He goes, no, with Toronto. He's a cop with Toronto. I actually called the station and said, could you run this name for me? Because I didn't believe him. And no, he was a cop, worked at a 54 division. So this was kind of like the beginning of my social media world. I put on Twitter afterwards and I said, worked hashtag Toronto Marathon, helped save a life. It was a great day. Well, that started a flurry of calls to the station. And I was going, this is the funny part. I was going to my girlfriend's house. I've known for years. Thank God she loves me, because let me tell you, no one else would put up with this. And two live eyes show up at her house. She's like, only you.
CP24 and some other news truck show up at your friend's house.
Yeah. And I'm like, can you watch my kids? Because they were a lot smaller at the time. I'm like, I need to go do an interview over the phone. She's like, okay. I hadn't even told her what was going on at this point. She had no idea. So she was having a Stella and Dot party, and I said I would come. So imagine, I've been doing a paid duty all day. I'm wearing my forge cap. My hair's a mess, whatever. So then I'm like, I need to borrow clothes. You need to fix my hair. I said, these
give me some of that jewelry.
Yeah. Can I just borrow this? I actually have the ring on I bought there. That's kind of funny.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, I did the live eyes. We did all that stuff. But I should back it up. Before I left the station and was heading to her house, I kind of had this adrenaline dump. Right. And I, was teary eyed because it was like, what just happened there? Right. Like when you're doing compressions on a human being, and then to find out it's a coworker, even though I didn't know him at the time, it was just one of those, whoo, what happened? Right. And then, I went.
What did you do then? You kind of broke down in your car, and then like, were you trained in the mental health stuff at that point?
No.
Okay. So it's not like you were like, okay, I got to do this. I got to debrief. I got to, so was it just like a few deep breaths and off you went to Stella and Dot?
Yeah. I had my tears, did my thing, and then off to the jewelry party and did my interviews. And I actually did, the next day I did more interviews, and I had to turn some down, and I feel bad doing that, but I was exhausted. I was mentally exhausted, and I just didn't want to do anymore. So the next day I go to the hospital, I meet Andrew, and I mean, we've been friends ever since, but he was doing the run to Ottawa, and I've always thought about doing it. So we do this run to Ottawa for fallen officers. It's called the 460 km because it's 460 kilometers. No, we don't ever, this is always the first question. You run 460 kilometers? I'm like, no. Relay,
right? Past the baton kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and Andrew was doing that at the time. So I was like, well, this is a good reason. I should just do it. So him and I ran together.
Okay, so wait. So Andrew was okay. You found out he was a police officer, and then he was okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I went to visit him at the hospital.
That's remarkable because was he without a pulse then for like 7 minutes? Wow.
Yep. And he was a runner all his life. His dad was a runner. It was one of those things, he had high cholesterol, and who would have thought, right?
Yeah.
Even though you're active, this is a little announcement for everybody. You still got to go to the doctors and get checked out, right? Because your genetics are your genetics. Doesn't matter what you do, right? So thankfully he survived, and I saw him at the hospital, and then we met for coffee, and it was a long road for him, but he finally got clearance to run, and he did the run to Ottawa. I believe it was that year. So that was in May, and this was
like a few months later in September, right?
Yeah. So I can't believe he did that, but he did. And so we ran together, and not every leg, but we did a couple of legs together. And he gave me his run watch that he was wearing that day. So I wore it until it like absolutely fell apart, and then I still think I still have it in one of my your sock drawer or something. Like I can't part with it, but I have it. Then we're still friends, and I don't know if he did a crazy thing, and he actually walked, whatever, all of it from Ottawa to Toronto to raise awareness and funds for AEDs, because if it wasn't for the AED, he wouldn't be alive.
Wow.
So, I need to back it up about the social media. So that doctor that I affectionately call Doogie Howser, just in case he ever sees this.
Yes.
I'm like, well, I need to get his name, but how am I going to get his name? Because he was there watching his girlfriend run. Andrew, the other doctor, was there watching his wife run. And I'm like, okay, well, somebody, I don't know why someone would do this. So they took a picture of us putting the AED pads on Andrew. So we kind of had everybody in play in this picture. So I cropped out, obviously, as much as I could of Andrew, and I just had the doctor. And I put it on social media, and I said, I just need to identify this doctor. If anybody knows who he is, please send me a DM, direct message. So within 12 hours, I got his name and where he worked, and I called the hospital. This crazy cop calling him going, hey, you don't know me, but yeah. So I got his name in for an award and everything, and it all worked out. But and he was actually a surgeon at Sunnybrook.
Wow.
So could I get
go.
Go Doogie, go. Yeah.
You had a
So
rock star team there with you.
I mean, and you know what he even said, and this is a huge compliment. Like I took this as really, he goes, that code, as they call them, right? When somebody codes and stops breathing, was run better than I've ever done in the hospital. That's what he said to me.
Wow,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Had you done CPR on anybody else between the fire in 99 and what year was this marathon? What year did that happen? Do you know?
So that was 9 years ago.
Okay. So had there been any other? Wow.
No,
Wow.
no. So that was a huge compliment coming from him. Yeah. So I started doing the run to Ottawa,
Yeah.
which I do every year.
And you are team captain for the National Peace Officers Memorial Run, right? But you also like I'm just looking at my notes here. I wrote them down before. So you've done the Walk for the Wounded. You've done you became an ambassador for All Okay. So can you tell me about like you've started taking your passion for running and mental health, and you've become an ambassador, an advocate. So tell me about kind of going that extra mile, no pun intended, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
one thing to talk about it, say at the police college, but you really live this, and you've really thrown a lot of yourself into it. Tell me a little bit about that and the things that you're involved with.
So the Walk for the Wounded, that's another funny story. How I roll, how I do things. So the team that was doing it, and one of them is my rock star roommates that I run with to Ottawa. So she's a machine, and I don't even try and keep up with her. But she was her and Craig and Mike and Tanya, and they were all police officers. They all worked together in one unit, and they needed a driver. And I was like, okay, I can do that. And then I'm like, but I can't just drive and not walk. This will kill me. So I said, I'll just do like, if you guys are okay, I'll do like, I don't know what I decided. I think 10K with each of them. So that would equal maybe do 12 on one. So the 42 that they're walking at once, I would get it done within the 4. And then Tanya's like, here, can you do my leg with me? I'm like, okay. So I did the full 42 with her, which was not planned, with a weighted vest on, right? And you do
22-pound vest, right?
Yeah, and then 22 push-ups every hour for it's an American stat, but the amount of veterans that take their life by suicide every week, I believe it is, or day. Oh, it might be daily. So they laughed at me because they're like, you were our driver. You did the least driving. I'm like, I know, I know,
You're gonna need another driver the next year.
I know. I said, don't ask me to drive because you know what's going to happen, right?
Yes.
So now that team will. Nat went to Surrey Police, so she's moved on, and the team didn't happen this year, and I had to go to a wedding, so it didn't happen. But All Okay had a team in, and so now I'm the team captain for next year.
So tell me about All Okay. What is All Okay?
So this was an organization. So I met them. They have Vimy the dog, right? Like and he was a puppy, and he was at the end event that we had for Walk for the Wounded. And Matt and Foddy, who run All Okay, Matt is still a member of the Canadian Army, so he's still an active member. They had this All Okay. They started following me, and I wasn't too sure what it was at the time, but it is in support of veterans and first responders. So what All Okay means is when you're out in the field and something happens. So whether, in the military world or even in first responders, when you have a major incident, you want to count your men and then you say, we're all okay. Everyone's accounted for. So that's kind of where the All Okay comes from. And it's just a huge support about buddy checks and checking in on your friends and whatnot. And I actually was just very supportive of what they were doing. I wasn't an ambassador at first. I'm saying, hey, my friend Brian would be a great ambassador, and he's a cop in New Zealand. And, I was just supporting them. And then they asked me to be an ambassador. I was like, absolutely. Why would I not? Right.
So it's for military members and first responders. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And it's just basically to remember to check in on each other. Right. And about pushing mental health and wellness and taking care of yourself. So they're just, the work they do, they're just amazing humans, those two. And we have a great group of ambassadors from all over. We have police officers, we have veterans, we have active military members. Like, if you could see our group chat, sometimes it's hard to keep up, but all like-minded people there for the same reasons, right? So after that Walk for the Wounded, I was like, I am never wearing this vest ever again in my life, ever. Like this thing is now an ornament. Nope. It is so heavy. And it like I could barely walk after. So then my veteran and active military friends are online posting that they're running with it. So I'm like, oh, well, now I gotta try that. So yes, now I do run with it at least once a week.
And you'll do like your 5 to 10K with that vest on?
I usually do about 6 to 7K with the vest on.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. I'm thinking about like the last time I used ankle weights, and those things are probably like what, 3 pounds? You're running with a 22-pound vest. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, Laurie, you've mentioned a couple of times. I've just noticed that like I've got my blinds closed and I've got, look at that. It's like
I see
my
it.
blinds are closed. I'm like, which way should I go? This way? Or no,
Or
then we
this
get the wine
way.
rack in there this way. Okay, so not only the wine rack, but my kids' Lego, a snow globe, some pictures. Okay, so you'd mentioned social media a few times already. So how did you get into social media? Were you always like a tech head, or how did this happen?
And I am social media savvy, not tech savvy. Do not confuse the two. I grew up
I'm obviously neither savvy.
Right? Typewriters. I didn't even do well in typing. I'm still a 2-finger typer.
You're not.
Well, I could maybe 3, like, or 4. But if I don't look, it's not gonna be in English. So I can type fast, but I have to look and see what I'm doing. Yeah, so I was not into social media. And then I was the crime analyst at 14 at the time. And they wanted all the crime analysts at the time to be on social media. So they sent me, and I'm like, I don't have time for this. I got my own Facebook. Like I don't have time for this. So I went, and I think it was just Twitter and Facebook at the time. Instagram wasn't really a thing. So I went, and I was like, yeah, okay. And it was Tim Burrows and Scott Mills that was teaching at the time, as long as I think Megan Gray was part of it too at the time. And I was like, okay. And then I started liking it. And then I wouldn't say I was like great at it, but I was good at it. And then I helped out. We didn't have TPOC at the time. So I'd help out Toronto Police, and like Scott Mills does have holidays. So then they'd ask myself.
You mean like the TPOC Twitter handle?
Yeah. So TPOC.
Yeah, it's the Toronto Police Operation Center. Is that right?
Center. Yeah.
Yes,
so we didn't have that. So everything went through our corporate account.
Yeah.
And then Scott would run that. But of course, Scott gets holidays. So it takes 3 of us to replace him because we have our own jobs to do. And then that was right at the time that I guess it was starting to become an issue in schools. So then a school had called, and of course the 2 guys I was working with was like, here, McCann will do it. And I was like, okay. So I put this presentation together. You look back, I'm like, oh, that was horrible. But
you've done so many presentations on that. I'm going on this side of the light. So, so schools started getting into it. What were they concerned about? What did they want you to come and talk about?
Safety was the key thing, right? Safety, and these kids on social media, and the bullying that was going on, and whatnot. So I was like, okay, no problem. It wasn't a horrible presentation. It's just not as good as my, more current ones.
You're going to be getting calls now asking for presentations.
Laurie. I know. I still do. do. So I did it, and then that started, one school, then another school, and 4 years later. And then I also worked with MAG, right, the Ministry of the Attorney General, and worked with probation officers and youth workers. And listen, don't be jealous. I went to Sudbury in January. I know you're jealous. I know you're jealous.
To go to Sudbury in January.
Who doesn't?
Okay, but how did it snowball like that? Is it just because there were so few people doing this, talking about social media safety?
Yeah.
Really?
I think, and it's still kind of that way. And you have to be constantly on it and updating your presentation because it's ever changing. And of course, I don't know everything, but you have to always be up on what are the kids on. Well, I have 2 teenagers, so it's just ask them. They'll tell me what's the new app, right? They'll tell me what's going on in the world.
What are they on these days? Is it all about TikTok still?
Oh, it's all about TikTok. And like my kids always like, do a TikTok with me. I'm like, no. Like I do the odd one, and I'm like, please tell me you're not posting that. Or Snapchat. Like they don't have conversations on text. That's very rare. It's usually their text messages are to their parents, and that's about it. It's all through Snap. Everything's on Snap. Like I watch them. I'm like, what are you doing? Like they take it'd be a quick picture of like the side of their head to reply to somebody. It's the weirdest thing.
And that's the one that disappears, right?
Yeah, it can. Yeah. Now they've got different settings on there. Now the one good thing with Snapchat is their server is encrypted. It's in the
Mm.
cloud, but it's encrypted. So things don't just get taken. Right. It's a lot harder to break into their stuff, but it's still dangerous, right? Because you can now, if I screen grabbed a photo you sent me, you're going to get a notification that says Laurie screen grabbed that.
But
So
that doesn't stop you then from sending it around the
no,
school. Yeah.
no,
Like
not
that
at all.
scares me. The Snapchat stuff, that one scares me because I
Yeah.
forgot about that, but I've got like a couple of nephews who are at that age and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, and they're big, so like the gamers, right? So they're big into gaming, and they'll use like Discord and Twitch and all of those. And prime example of Twitch, it's a gaming app, but if you remember, I don't even like saying his name, Chris Sky, remember him, the anti-masker? Exactly, right? That's
Trying to forget.
So he used Twitch to get his videos out because he was banned on every other platform. So he would do it through Twitch, right? So stuff like that. So it's being used for other than gaming purposes. So and you can private message on those, and you can talk to strangers. So it's just all about safety, right? So I kind of like I'm still in that. Like I'm doing a presentation at the end of the month. It's online. But the guy, he calls me, he goes, "You're hard to find." I'm like, "What do you mean I'm hard to find?" "Well, I found you on the internet, but then I didn't know how to get hold of you." I'm like, that's kind of cool and creepy all at once. Okay.
Yeah,
right?
but send you a message on the internet. Like I think that's the first time I reached out to you was over Twitter, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
So he found me though. And that's who I'm doing the presentation for at the end of January. But yeah, it just kind of mushroomed. And I guess it's just organic, right? So one person hears about you, or they see your presentation at a school and they work, and and they told two friends, and like the was it Vidal Sassoon commercial, and then they told two friends, and then I don't know.
Oh, Vidal Sassoon. I have not seen one of those commercials. The long straight, I'm picturing like long straight brunette, like brown hair. I remember when I was younger, like wanting to have that hair. My hair was like big and frizzy, and oh my gosh, we are getting off topic, Laurie. Continue.
We are, and that's a whole other conversation. But yes. So it just kind of organically happened where I've gotten to travel all over the world. I've been very lucky to do that. To speak about social media. So it depends on my audience. So to law enforcement, kind of keeping them up to date on, what are the current apps? What do you have to do if you're dealing with a crime? Because there's still a lot of officers that aren't too sure, what am I supposed to do if something happens online? How do I capture that information? How do I, I won't bore you with the details. So,
no, but that's really interesting, that because like it sounds like such an essential tool. Like I would think that it's such an essential tool to understand that stuff, because especially when you're dealing with like teenagers or young people like in their 20s, like social media has got to be a part of so many investigations, I would think, right? It's the way they communicate. There's evidence on there, like everything.
100%. So I said that, with a crime scene, you're going to have a physical and a digital, and it's pretty much almost every crime scene will have a bit of both, right? You're going to have both. So to kind of keep that in mind, right? So yeah, just kind of like I deal with students, I deal with parents, I deal with other law enforcement agencies, and and not as much as I used to. And obviously COVID kind of changed that, and trying to teach social media online, let me tell you.
Really?
It's just hard because I'm very interactive, and I'll walk around and so it's hard to do that because you feel like you're talking to yourself.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And you're like, is anyone there? Anyone? Bueller? Like
talking
somebody.
into the abyss. Exactly. I feel the same. I always say that, like, because I do some radio hosting, and when I have to like host by myself and I don't have a guest, and I'm just like, usually the first segment of every show is like a rant, just kind of got to talk for like 9 or 10 minutes. I can't stand it because I just feel like I'm just like, exactly, Bueller. Is anybody listening? Yes.
Yeah, so I'll take in person over online any day.
Yeah. But in person, you can't wear your slippers and stretchy pants.
Well,
although if you're doing it from the office anyway.
That would be awkward, wearing my stretchy pants and slippers to work. But yeah, but you're right. I do enjoy because there's always a question, right? So what I'll do, because my kids say Facebook's for old people. But for all of these, social workers and youth workers, and I had one where the woman said, on my people you may know, one of my clients, which would be a youth, his mother popped up why did that happen? Because she's trying to find you on social media and she's creeping
Really?
your stuff. So now we're talking, okay, so here's social media and how to deal with your youth, but hey, you got to keep yourself safe as well. So, because you're
Hmm.
going to have these youth or their parents trying to find you on social media because you're their,
Wow.
yeah, so
That's
it's
what that
locking down.
means? People you may know?
So you're going to get people that'll say you have mutual friends. So it may pop up because you have mutual friends
Mhm.
or if somebody's creeped you or
Really?
tried to. Yes. So you always have to check your settings. So I do the whole Facebook settings, usually with those groups to make sure that their accounts are locked down
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise you're letting, the undesirables will say, look at your personal stuff. And you have to be really careful with that. Like my accounts are in fake name. I shouldn't say that, but not my real name.
Mm.
Yeah, my personal stuff because
Of
I don't
course.
want, well, my Facebook is because I don't, and there's no pictures of me or my kids
Yeah.
or my family on my cover because you can never ever hide that,
Yeah.
or my profile. So you're
Yeah.
never gonna know it's me. No,
Yeah. So you are still active on, like, you didn't get sick of social media doing it in your professional life all the time. You're still active personally.
I am. Yeah. So if you go, my Instagram's locked down, but it's mostly running. It's
Mm-hmm.
just, oh, there she's running again.
That's right.
Um, or I'll put, my kids' birthdays or something. Yes, or I'll post something, right?
Yeah.
I do a lot. So as you'll see on my work ones, for fallen officers, with Greg, and I'm going to Pierce Chawla. I'm probably butchering his last name. So, so here's the power of social media. I wasn't even going to talk about this, but because it just came up, there's a young gentleman in Florida by the name of Zachariah, and he runs. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Keep
Yeah.
going.
So I noticed him a long time ago, and somebody actually called him out and said, "Hey, why don't you run for Canadian officer?" So he runs 1 mile for every firefighter, military,
Mm.
paramedic, and officer that dies in the States. And as we all very well know, that's a lot.
Yeah.
He's done almost 1,500 miles this year,
Wow.
at the end of 2022. So he started doing Canadian officers. And then I was talking to his dad. I wanted to bring him here for our run to Ottawa, but then COVID and he wasn't vaccinated at the time. And there's a whole
Uh,
other, so we're still going to try and bring him, but just the power of social media. And so he did a run for Greg
mm,
recently. So I posted all about that because I think it's
mm,
very important to
mm,
realize that not what happens in Canada is seen worldwide.
mhm,
And this young kid, I think he's 13 now, I want to
mhm,
say, he does his homework. He does his
mm,
homework on these officers and gets all the
mm.
information about them. And then what he does at the end of that run, the flag that he runs with, he mails that with a personalized letter to the family.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's just an amazing individual,
Mm,
him and his family. They've raised their kids right. And yeah, I just so things like that, I'll do that on my work account.
mhm,
But I don't generally post that on my personal stuff. I kind of keep
mhm,
the two separate because it is a
mhm,
lot to be posting all the time, right?
mhm,
So yeah, it does get exhausting at times though. Don't get me wrong. There's days where I'm like, I
mhm.
want nothing to do with this social
I
media thing.
know. I took off, like, I took a break from social media. I've tried to make this like an annual thing over the holidays, and it's refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have personal accounts really. I mean, Twitter, sometimes I'll put some personal stuff on there, but most of it is just professional stuff. And yeah, like anything that's public, there's no pictures of my kids. There's no selfies. Like, I don't do selfies anyway. My husband would roll his eyes at that because we're always doing family selfies. I insist on it.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, social media, as I said in a previous conversation with you, Laurie, I'll probably be calling you like when my kids, who are 4,
Yeah.
6, and 8 right now, are at that age, because I'm like, every day almost I say, like, I just hope they figure this stuff out by the time our kids are at that age. Like, get rid of the
Yeah.
dangerous stuff.
Yeah.
But
And
it's
it's interesting because parents will say you're not getting it, you're not getting it, you're not having social media. And I can tell
mhm,
you friends of my kids that if one of them had hid it from her parents for a long time. And then they
mm,
finally said, "Oh, you can have it." Well, she'd have had it for years.
yeah.
So I'd rather know that they're on it and
Mhm,
be on there and being able to see what they're doing than them doing it behind your back and you have
mhm,
no idea what's going on because then they're not going to come to you if something
mhm.
bad happens to them, right?
Right.
Because they weren't supposed to have that app in the first place. So
Right.
saying no, I get it to a certain age, don't get me wrong, but once they hit, whether it's, I don't know, 11 or 12, and all their friends have it,
Oh, that seems
and
so young.
but
I
you
have an
say
11-year-old
no.
niece. I don't want her on Snapchat or
Yeah. well, okay, we'll say
whatever,
12.
TikTok.
Yeah, but they'll do it anyways, right?
Ah.
They are tech savvy and they will open up an account and you won't know about it. And now what are they posting? You have no idea. You think, oh, they're safe. They're not on it. Oh, they're on it.
I've heard though, Laurie, about kids who will have a safe account for their parents to be on their friends list and then have another account that is under a different name that their parents don't know about. And that's where they get into trouble.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Yeah. My kids try that and I found it. So it's like, yeah, no.
Of course they did. Why would they try that when their parent is not both? Well, you and your husband are both police officers, right? Their parents are both police officers and their mom is a social media expert. You will find it. You are the social media sleuth. Okay, Laurie, I'm trying to think if I feel like we've covered a lot of ground, but is there anything that you wanted to get into this conversation we haven't talked about yet, or anything that you, and this is something I ask all officers, that you want the public to know, to understand about yourself, about your fellow officers, about policing in general?
I think, we always say, we use that term, humanizing the badge, right? And what does that mean? It just basically means we are all human like you. We bleed like you do. We have emotions like you do. We cry like you do. We're here to do a job and to serve the public. And we decided, to take the oath. And I'm not saying there's not bad cops. There's bad people in every profession you work in, right? Every profession. But there's a lot of good cops out there that are here for the right reasons. And, I get it. Sometimes it's the uniform, not the person behind it. So for officers, just realize it's not you, it's the uniform that they don't like. But, give the officer a chance if they're there to talk to you. And, my motto has always been for many, many years that this job, 80% of it is your mouth. It's going to get you into trouble and it's going to get you out of trouble. But yeah, we have those tools on our belt and at times we have to use them, but 80% of our job is talking to people, right? And a little compassion goes a long way on both sides, right? That being who we're talking to and the officers.
All right. What a fantastic message to end on, Laurie. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure as always.